I'm Denver 7's Russell Haythorne, and welcome to Denver Decides. This community partnership is dedicated to accessible and transparent elections. The partnership includes the League of Women Voters and Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation. Denver Decides is presented by Denver 8 TV. Our goal today is to present a ballot issue forum as we gear up for the election on Tuesday, November 8th. Among the decision items for voters on this year's ballot is Ordinance number 306, which asks Denver voters if businesses in Denver should be required to offer composting and recycling services. Our format for this forum will follow a basic debate outline with opening and closing statements, dialogue between the two speakers, and will include responses to questions submitted by the forum organizers. Let's begin by meeting the participants who will present and discuss the pros and cons of initiated Ordinance number 306. Beginning at my right is Ian Thomas Tafoya. Ian is co-author and co-campaign director with Green Latinos, and Mr. Tafoya will be speaking for the ordinance. Ian, thank you for being here. And on my left is Dennis Royer, who is the former Chief of Public Works and Transportation and Public Works Commissioner for the City of Boston and former Denver Deputy Manager of Public Works. Mr. Royer will be speaking against the ordinance, and we welcome Mr. Royer. We welcome both of you. We will begin with 1 minute and 30-second opening statements from both of our speakers. And as you can see, our speaker timers, as the speakers can see, their timers are right out front. The timer will start counting down when you have 1 minute left to speak. Mr. Tafoya, you're up first, speaking for the ordinance. You have a minute and a half.
Hello to everyone in the audience. My name is Ian Thomas Tafoya. I am the co-author, co-campaign director of Waste No More, also known as Initiative 306, and a candidate for Denver Mayor. Vote yes on 306 by November 8th. Waste No More Denver is a people's-led initiative to ensure everyone in Denver can recycle and compost no matter where they live, work, or play. Brought to you by the hard work of hundreds of volunteers who collected signatures during COVID, frontline volunteers for a better future. Our problem? Climate crisis. According to the Denver Climate Action Sustainability and Resiliency Office, waste accounts for over 20% of our carbon emissions each year. And additionally, 82% of Denver's waste comes from the commercial sector targeted by this law. Denver currently does not require businesses, apartments, or the construction industry to compost or recycle, though our city's solid waste master plan and many other city plans call for these practices to be enacted. The good thing is, our community has the solution, Initiative 306, which would require education of the people and businesses and a phased-in approach of requiring commercial waste diversion from apartments, restaurants, food trucks, hotels, venues, and festivals, beginning with the largest businesses first. Vote yes on 306 by November 8th. Learn more and take action to win at wastenomoredenver.org.
Thank you, Ian. You timed that well. And now an opening statement from Dennis Royer. Dennis, you have the stage.
Thank you. For most people who probably don't know me, I consider myself an environmentalist. In 2005, Gary Price and I convinced John Hickenlooper to put in single-stream recycling here in Denver. I then moved on to Boston, and in Boston I convinced Mayor Thomas Menino to put in single-stream recycling and was told it was the most popular program he had ever put in 20 years. Prior to that, as the city traffic engineer, I worked with the Air Quality Control Commission and all the other groups to get rid of the number one embarrassment in Denver, the brown cloud. And we became the poster child for the EPA because we could prove that their air quality standards could be met at high altitude. Now, the question I have for the people who are proposing this is pretty much, where have you been the last 10 years? We had a strong economy, low interest rates, low inflation that would have encouraged investment. Today, we have a bad economy, 40-year high in inflation, interest rates are climbing and haven't even peaked yet, which will affect investment. The supply chain problems are adding delay and cost. Grocery prices are now up 20%. Gas prices, we just went through an artificial inflation and back down again because the oil and gas companies decided to take more profit rather than boost production, which is a problem for all of us. As a result, as I see it, this is the wrong time to add costs to the consumer.
Dennis, thank you for that. You timed that well as well. You now have 1 minute to expand on that, expand on your opening statement, or you can offer a rebuttal to Ian's opening statement.
Well, I'm going to offer rebuttal to what they're proposing to do, okay? This program doesn't really accomplish that much, okay? Per the EPA, methane is only 50% of landfill gas, okay? This only affects Denver, and Denver is only 1/3 of the metro population. So what we have here is their proposal is only an incremental reduction in methane coming out of the local landfills, okay? It's not that significant, okay? Their primary position is you need to start somewhere and get something done, okay? The cost of this will be passed on to the average consumer. Guaranteed. The businesses are not going to absorb this cost, okay? So you and I, if we go to a restaurant, might likely see higher costs. The renters are going to see an increase, and I'm on the board of a homeowners association, and I guarantee you, we already did voluntary recycling. We have to rebuild the enclosures and find a place to put these dumpsters.
Dennis, thank you for that. Ian, you also have 1 minute to either offer a rebuttal to Dennis's opening statement, or you can expand on your own.
For the listeners at home, these are the same tired arguments we've heard that have made it impossible to take the climate action we needed more than 30 years ago. When is the right time? The time is now. Our city plans, the climate itself, the droughts we're experiencing, the heat island effect, all of these things are a reality that Denverites are living every single day. If we fail to take action now, it only sets us back. But what I can tell you is the community was here 10 years ago. This has been in our plans for decades. What we've lacked is the leadership to actually achieve it. That's why the community went out to do it themselves. I will like to point out for a second, people aren't creating more trash. This is about diverting the trash they have, and it actually could end up being the same volume. You might have to switch out your containers. It will take time. But I really believe in the faith of the individuals in our city to be educated and work collectively to divert more waste, which is actually good for our economy because the goods stay here.
Ian, thank you. We now move on to our one-on-one rounds, and our speakers will have some choices when it comes to this round. And we begin with Ian. Ian, you can either ask Dennis a direct question, and Dennis will have 1 minute to respond to that question, or Ian, you may take the minute to expand on any statement you've previously made.
I want to take this opportunity because we've been getting questions from the community. We've been working on this ordinance for 2 years, and really it goes even further back than that. When we were petitioning for other environmental initiatives over the last 6 years, the number one thing people said is, why don't I have recycling in my community? How can I make this more equitable? But we're also hearing that perhaps there may be challenges for people to initiate this program over time. And we want to let people know that there is an exemption that can be applied for from businesses, and to allow them to make the changes they might need and get the assistance they may need over time. They include economic hardships, de minimis volumes or small amounts of materials, or self-hauling of recycled and compost materials, and space constraints. So I do believe that the ordinance is drafted in a way that is flexible for the community to find the solutions that are individualized, because we can always select a place and say it won't work because of that. I do think we can work together to make it happen.
Ian, thank you so much. And Dennis, now it's your turn. You can ask Ian a direct question, and he'll have a minute to respond to your question, or you can expand on some of your previous statements.
Well, I'd like to ask Ian a question, and that is, jobs creation is a major emphasis of your initiative. What types of jobs, income, and career path are you creating in the waste and recycling industry?
Ian.
I appreciate that question. As I was mentioning, yes, this does create jobs. And what we know from both the state level and the local level analysis is that recycling creates 9 times more jobs than landfilling does. And what we know is that according to the EPA, recycling and the reuse of materials has supported more than 681,000 jobs across the United States, creating more than $37 billion in wages and $5 billion in tax revenue alone. There's a lot of room to grow, and of course, as an industry expands, there will be that. But there goes from sorting to distribution to drivers to the people who do the marketing. There are so many kinds of jobs that are created, and that's not even accounting for the supply chains that will now be created if we're able to, instead of sending these raw materials to the landfill, find good uses for them to be built and manufactured in our city. A green economy for Denver is what we're seeking.
Thank you, Ian. Dennis, you have a chance to respond to Ian, or you can ask another question of him.
Well, I'm going to respond a little bit because you sit there and make it sound like jobs are going to be really lucrative or wonderful for everybody. In the recycling industry, you're mostly talking laborers. Some management that's probably already in place, and they're going to be doing sorting, picking things up, delivering things or whatever. In the waste industry, you're talking primarily drivers, okay? RTD can't get drivers. Denver Public Schools can't get drivers. Construction can't get drivers. Denver Solid Waste is delaying theirs because they don't have enough drivers. And you're talking about expanding. You can't just go and grab Tom, Dick, and Harry off the street and say, here, drive this truck. They have to have a CDL. Then they've got to learn to do it. The other thing is that most of us would not be able to do the job because, you know, the dumpsters are perpendicular to the alleys. Somebody's got to move those out so that they can put the forks in and dump that. So it's got to be somebody far more physically capable than I am to be able to do those jobs. The other question I'd ask you is, how many people do you know have ever said, I've retired after 30 or 40 years driving a garbage truck?
Ian, would you like to respond to that, or would you like to ask Dennis a question of your own?
Well, I'd like to say that there's dignity in all forms of labor, that these are opportunities for people to unionize, to work in co-ops for their own ownership, that skilled labor is exactly what this is. I would also say it's not just Tom, Dick, or Harry. It could be Ilda or Sally or Rebecca. This is a new economy for people to be joining into. And what I can say to you is that actually in my day job, I do commercial transportation, public policy, and I've met plenty of drivers who have retired with dignity after 30 years of driving. And so I really feel like we're missing the mark here, that these jobs are jobs that people are choosing. And we shouldn't be disqualifying a job as something that is unskilled or unnecessary for a society that is providing a huge service for us all.
Ian, thank you. Gentlemen, we're moving on to round 3 and another one-on-one round. So Ian, we'll begin with you this time. You can ask Dennis a direct question. He'll have 1 minute to respond, or you can expand on any of the points that you've made so far.
I have a question for you about how would you expect, or what would your plan be for us to get to the 20% emissions that our climate plan is calling for and our solid waste master plan is calling for, if not this policy?
Well, technology exists today that you can insert pipes into landfills and you can take out the methane and carbon dioxide that's generated. You have the ability to either use that to create electricity by burning it, or you can reconvert it in cogeneration to fuel that can be used for various instances or whatever like that. It's already been done elsewhere in the United States. Now, I will agree, this is a far more costly solution, but the key here is if government were to go in with the private sector and create a subsidized situation to create this cogeneration, it's a win-win. Plus the fact it could be done with the oil and gas industry because they already have the expertise and they're already here in the state of Colorado. So it offers up a better situation and better jobs than what would be offered simply by doing this. And it takes the methane down to about 95%, and you can do it not only out existing, but previous landfills.
Dennis, I'll give you another minute to expand on that, or you can ask Ian a question yourself.
Well, I'm going to ask Ian a question because I think this is one of the things the consumers would like to know, and that is your website tap dances around the issue of cost to the consumer. Why did you not provide an estimated cost for this service expansion to building owners, rental units, and condos? Surely you could have at least provided a cost for what additional dumpster service would be to the private sector.
Ian.
I think you're offering a reductionist argument here. It all depends on how much you actually waste. So for us to universally say per volume in this location, it's hard to do. You have to know what your business is producing. You have to know what your volumes are. You have to know when people are picking up, if you're already on a route. It's a complex question, but some of the things we do know is that based on regular volume, recycling and waste diversion or to the landfill are roughly the same per square volume. Now, composting has a higher cost initially, and we believe that is because that fewer people are using it. You have admitted that recycling is something that's come along further. So as more and more people are on the composting, they'll be routing more, and it should be lowering the cost. But what I will say is if people have a question, we actually have a certifiable Green Denver business program that you could have accessed for years, and you can now to get assistance in finding these solutions.
Dennis, would you like to offer a rebuttal to that? Or would you like to ask Ian another question?
Well, again, I would like to say simply because I'm on the board of a condo association, okay, and we voluntarily implemented recycling, and it increased our costs per year significantly. Plus the fact it costs thousands of dollars because for aesthetic reasons, we have everything in enclosures. So we're looking, first of all, it's an older complex approaching 60 years. Just finding a location for a compost bin and then paying the money to put the enclosures in is going to be a significant, and we will have to raise the maintenance fees in order to cover all this. Okay? Now, part of the problem with this is people keep saying this is composting. It is not. Compost is the final material that's generated that is organic and has to go through an entire process. What you're doing is you're picking up leaves, branches, household waste and other stuff, and grass clippings or whatever. But then it has to go through a process to become compost.
Thank you, Dennis. Ian, one final chance to offer a rebuttal to that or ask Dennis a question before we get to our card questions from the forum organizers.
This is not a question. This is just a statement I want to make, and I want people at home to really think this through. Have you ever been at a festival where you had an aluminum can in your hand and you walked around and said, gosh, I'd really like to recycle this because I recycle it at home, but you're unable to? The business isn't providing that to you. Wouldn't you like to have the option to do the thing that you've been educated to do, that you know is environmentally sustainable, that you know will be returned to the shelf within the year? I'm asking you to really, in your heart, think about it. Can we make this phased-in approach? Over 5 years, starting with the largest businesses, the largest volumes of producers, to reduce the climate impact and to create jobs in our community while you get to feel good about what you're doing. If you're like me, I think you agree with us, vote yes.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Dennis. Our next rounds will feature both of our speakers responding to questions submitted by our forum organizers, and they will each have 1 minute to respond to these questions. We will begin with Ian Thomas Tafoya, who again is here speaking in support of initiated Ordinance number 306, which asks Denver voters if businesses in Denver, including hospitals, should be required to offer composting and recycling services. So Ian, this first question is for you. This is from the forum organizers. Who or what entity will be responsible for locating all of the eligible buildings and be responsible for the oversight of the requirements that are in this ballot issue?
According to the ordinance, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure is tasked with this. I certainly think they're going to have to work together with Excise and License and Denver Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency Office. What we do know is that there have been many questions that have been asked over the last 2 years, and we do know that our ordinance has dates in it that need to change. We were hoping to make the ballot last year, and you can imagine because of COVID, it was very challenging to get people to pick up a pen and to sign. So what we do know is there will be a task force. What we do know is that the people of Denver are committed to taking climate action and reducing our waste. And so in the end, will it be one agency or multiple? It remains to be seen. But the way the ordinance is written now is the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure.
All right, thank you, Ian. Our next question is for Dennis. And again, Dennis Royer is here speaking against initiated Ordinance number 306. And Dennis, this question is from forum organizers. What responsibilities do large apartment buildings have regarding decreasing the waste stream?
Well, being an environmentalist and having installed some of this stuff already, I don't argue against the fact that we ought to be doing something to this effect. Came back from Canada a number of years ago, and their airport and everything had all things broken up separately. You go to Canada, we got it. You come back to Denver, as Ian pointed out, you don't have anything, okay? This could have easily been done, particularly at the special events, okay? That was just a situation the administration in charge didn't care, okay? So things could have been done. It's been a while that these things. Apartment buildings are going to be more difficult, okay? Because they're already built. So they have limited space on what they can do, and they may not be on an alley. So that's all got to be figured out, okay, on how are they going to fit that in and do it. Should it be done? Should everybody eventually be doing this? Yes, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying right now isn't exactly the best time to pile on to the costs people are absorbing.
We appreciate that, Dennis. The next question is for you as well. Again, these are from forum organizers. How might our recycling needs be met without this ordinance?
Well, if you're just going to take recycling, as I pointed earlier, I was pointing at the landfill and trying to make sure we're dealing with the methane, which is a significant issue that's got to be dealt with. In terms of recycling, we have to set up a market that encourages people to be able to take the material and do recycle it, because there's an additional cost in order to do that. I'm not sure the market is that huge right now. I know that when we were doing this during the recession in Boston and China shut off taking our paper and cardboard, we were filling up warehouses in order to do that because there wasn't a standing market in the United States to take that recycle, okay? Now you're talking about construction material, okay, which is very specific in terms of having to divide that up and have markets for the individual items. I can't sit here and say to you today that market actually exists in a large capacity.
Dennis, thank you for that. Ian, the next question is for you, and Dennis has pointed this out in the debate. Rising costs, inflation. At this time of rising prices and rising rents, this measure will increase construction costs, could increase costs to apartment owners and families with, apartments with 8 or more families. They will have rising costs, and mobile food vendors will also have higher operating costs. With that in mind, should this measure go into effect in 2024, or should we wait until the economy stabilizes?
Well, I want to say that this is phasing in over many, many years, and it actually starts with the largest businesses, the largest square footage. So when you talk about the cost per resident in the apartment buildings as an example, it's being shared across the most amount of people. But what I can tell you is, if you look at the climate action plan for the city of Denver, which is now almost 2 years old, and we have not nearly taken the action required, we need to, as a community, invest at least $2 billion over the next 10 years to save ourselves more than 10 times that in the implications of climate crisis, heat island effect. There are so many pieces that are involved in it. What I can tell you too is that the businesses aren't alone. There are resources, as I mentioned for you earlier. There are resources in the city and county of Denver to help businesses find the path that works for them. And I want to remind you, there are economic hardships exemptions that are written into this. And lastly, I want to say at the state level, there was a bill passed this year called Producer Responsibility, which will actually provide recycling to every resident in Colorado over the next 5 years.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That brings us to the end of our Q&A segment, and now we're moving on to your closing statements. Each speaker will have a minute and a half, 90 seconds for closing statements, and we will reverse the order of opening statements. That means we begin with Dennis Royer. Dennis, you have 90 seconds to offer a closing statement.
Thank you, Russell. This referendum is not all that it proposes to be. It has some positive impact, but it is simply marginal in its accomplishing its intended goal, okay? It is only an incremental reduction in local methane from landfills, so it only affects Denver. It's an additional cost to consumers, renters, and condo owners since the cost will be passed on. Private industry will be expected to make significant investment during a bad economy. It needs to be repurposed for the metro area or statewide to have a significant impact. There are better ways, proven methodology to significantly reduce landfill gases, as I've mentioned, okay? Yes, there will be a cost. It will cost more, But if we created a subsidized program with government working with private industry, that would be a much better long-term approach. As I mentioned before, the oil and gas industry is here. They have the expertise to do this. And by doing this, we're going to significantly reduce methane and control of landfills, which have the direct impact on the environment, okay? And it also creates better jobs than the waste industry, okay? Drivers and laborers are not that great. My final comment to these people is, nice try, try again.
Dennis, thank you very much. We appreciate your educated responses there. And now, Ian, it is your turn for a closing statement.
What you've heard during this debate is that the community has come together to say the time is now. That our city is ready to enact plans that our residents and government have worked so hard to create. It's time to turn plans into action. You heard the waste accounts for over 20% of Denver's climate emissions, and that recycling and composting are some of the easiest and cheapest ways to take climate action now. You heard that commercial businesses account for 82% of Denver's materials that could be diverted from the landfill. Initiative 306 takes a phased-in and measured approach to requiring recycling and composting from businesses in our community. Denverites, through our plans and through our votes, have shown we want climate action and a more sustainable future. When infrastructure is coupled with education, we know firsthand we can stop sending valuable materials to the landfills and instead invest in our local economy and soil. Again, my name is Ian Thomas Tafoya, a co-author and campaign director of Initiative 306 and a candidate for Denver mayor. Learn more at wastenomoredenver.org. Join us in taking action like knocking doors and making phone calls. It's time to waste no more, Denver. Vote yes on 306 by November 8th.
Ian, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you both for the robust and respectful discussion here tonight. I know I learned a lot. I hope our viewers did as well. That was great. We really appreciate it. And on behalf of our forum organizers, I'd like to again thank you both for participating in this forum. Our thanks also to our Denver Decides partners, which include Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation and the League of Women Voters of Denver. Denver Decides is presented by Denver 8 TV. We hope we've given you a fair look at the pros and cons of initiated ordinance number 306. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Let your voice be heard. Be sure you're registered to vote and get out there and vote. For complete election information, go to denverdecides.org. I'm Russell Haythorne from Denver 7. Thank you for joining us.